The glass chandeliers of Le Marigny, Atlanta's most exclusive French restaurant, glimmered like captured starlight. Every table was draped in ivory linen. Every server moved with rehearsed grace, and every guest carried the aura of wealth and power. At the center table sat Charles Wentworth III, a man whose name appeared as often in Forbes as in gossip columns. His company, Wentworth Capital Holdings, dominated Atlanta's skyline, and the man himself was used to being treated like financial royalty. As Nia Carter, a 29-year-old waitress, approached his table with a pitcher of Evian, Charles didn't even look up from his phone. "How about giving me some financial advice along with that water?" he said with a smirk, his tone dripping condescension. His friends chuckled. Nia paused mid-pour. She had served hundreds of men like him, powerful, entitled, and blind to the humanity of those they considered beneath them. But something in his voice hit a nerve. "Actually," she replied smoothly, "I'd allocate 40% to sustainable energy ETFs in emerging markets, 25% to undervalued medical technology, 20% to commercial real estate in second-tier cities, 10% in agricultural commodities, and keep 5% liquid for arbitrage plays." The silence that followed was heavy enough to break glass. Charles slowly looked up, his grin freezing in disbelief. His companions, a collection of venture capitalists and politicians, stared as if the air had changed temperature. "Excuse me," Charles said, his voice lower now. "You asked for investment advice," Nia said, continuing to pour the water with unflinching calm. "That would be my recommendation." Every waiter, every patron, and even the maitre d' froze. No one had ever seen anyone talk to Charles Wentworth that way. One of his guests, Harold Knox, an executive at Wentworth Capital, cleared his throat. "Charles, maybe she's read your book." But Charles was no longer amused. He studied her face, his interest replacing arrogance. "Where'd you learn about emerging markets, Miss Carter?" she said, her eyes meeting his. "And you'd be surprised what you can learn when you don't underestimate people." That line, quiet but razor-sharp, sent a ripple through the room. As Nia walked away, Charles found himself watching her, confusion twisting with fascination. Who was this woman? The search begins. The next morning, Charles sat in his 43rd floor office overlooking downtown Atlanta. The memory of the waitress's words kept replaying in his head. 40% in sustainable energy ETFs. He hadn't been able to sleep. It wasn't just what she'd said. It was how she'd said it. "Robert," he said to his longtime associate, "I want a full background check on a woman named Nia Carter, waitress at Le Marigny. Find out everything: school, employment, social media, anything." Robert hesitated. "You think she's a corporate plant?" "No," Charles replied, leaning back. "But I don't like mysteries." 3 days later, the report landed on his desk. Nia Carter, 29. Degree in economics from Georgia State University. No prior high-level employment. No record of financial licenses or firm experience. No major debt. No criminal history. Barely any online presence. "That's it." Charles frowned. "That's all," Robert said. "She's clean. Almost too clean." Charles stared at the report. Something didn't add up. No one talks like that about global finance without serious background, and yet she appeared invisible to the world. What he didn't know was that Nia's file was manufactured. 5 years earlier, Nia Carter had been Dr. Nia Hammond, a senior quantitative analyst at Vanguard Strategies, one of Wall Street's elite hedge funds. She had written predictive trading algorithms responsible for $300 million in profit, until her white male supervisor framed her for insider trading when the SEC came sniffing around. No charges were ever filed, but the scandal destroyed her name. Her credentials vanished. Her savings evaporated. and the industry she'd helped build turned its back on her. Now she worked under an alias, rebuilding her life and waiting for the right opportunity. Curiosity turns to obsession. Charles began frequenting Le Marigny, always requesting Nia's section. Each visit, his questions grew sharper. What do you think of currency fluctuations in Southeast Asia? You really believe renewable ETFs can outperform tech? Where'd you really learn to analyze markets like that? And every time, Nia answered calmly, precisely, like a professor explaining to a persistent student. Soon, the entire restaurant staff noticed. The city's most powerful financier was suddenly fixated on one waitress. But Nia wasn't flattered. She was calculating. Each night, while Charles thought he was studying her, she was noting his mannerisms, listening to fragments of his phone calls, and memorizing the confidential details he carelessly discussed in public. Charles never imagined that the waitress he condescended to might be building a case against him, one piece of data at a time. The trap tightens. Weeks passed. Charles's obsession deepened. His company, Wentworth Capital, was preparing a hostile takeover of Meditronics, a billion-dollar biotech firm rumored to have developed breakthrough gene therapy tech. At dinner one night, he tried to humiliate Nia publicly. "Tell me, Nia," he said loudly, "what's your take on the biotech sector? You seem to know everything." Nia smiled politely. "I'd say Meditronics is overvalued, risky bet." Charles laughed cruelly. "Shows what you know. We're about to acquire them at half market value. You should stick to waiting tables." Guests chuckled. The humiliation was deliberate. But what he didn't know was that Nia had already overheard him discussing insider information about Meditronics' patents. Information that no outsider could possibly know. That night, as she walked home under Atlanta's neon haze, she made a call to a voice from her past, Devin Blake, a former compliance officer turned investigative journalist. "Devin," she said, "remember the files I told you about? I found something bigger." The storm breaks. 2 weeks later, Wentworth Capital was hosting its Grand Investor Summit at the Peachtree Tower Conference Center. Charles stood before a room of foreign investors, proudly presenting charts and projections about the Meditronics acquisition. "Gentlemen," he declared, "this deal will redefine the biotech market and double your investment within a year." Then the doors opened. Nia entered, not in her waitress uniform, but in a Navy executive suit. The murmurs spread instantly. Charles froze. "Miss Carter." "Not quite," she said calmly, setting a sleek black briefcase on the table. "It's Dr. Hammond, actually, and I'm afraid you've built your empire on stolen information." The room went silent. Charles laughed, a desperate sound. "Security. Before you do that," Nia said, "you might want to see this." She connected her laptop to the projector. Emails appeared, confidential exchanges between Wentworth executives and Meditronics board members, time-stamped months before any public announcement. Gasps rippled through the room. "How did you?" Charles started. "You left your phone face up every time you dined at Le Marigny," Nia said evenly. "Microphones in the restaurant pick up everything within 3 meters. You were careless enough to discuss insider details in public." Repeatedly. She advanced the slides. Audio files played. Charles's own voice. "Make sure the Meditronics board keeps quiet until we move our positions. If the SEC catches wind, we'll lose billions." The investors began to stand. "Is this true?" one demanded. Nia turned to them. "All of this has already been sent to the SEC, the FBI, and the Financial Times. Tomorrow's headline reads, Atlanta billionaire accused of multi-billion-dollar insider trading scheme. Charles's world collapsed in real time. "You ruined me," he shouted. "You ruined yourself," Nia replied. "I just turned on the lights." Aftermath. Within 48 hours, Wentworth Capital was in freefall. The SEC froze assets, partners withdrew funding, and Charles Wentworth III became the most infamous man in Atlanta. Nia's true story, her fall and her revenge, exploded across the media. The Wall Street Journal, Waitress exposes Billionaire's fraud. CNN, the analyst who outsmarted a titan. 6 months later, Nia stood in the corner office of Hammond Financial Integrity, her new consulting firm specializing in uncovering white-collar fraud. Devon was now her partner, and 3 of Atlanta's top investment funds were her clients. She looked out over the skyline, champagne glass in hand. 15 years, Devon said. That's the sentence. Fitting, Nia replied. He spent 15 years teaching people that money makes them untouchable. She smiled faintly, gazing at the city below. Turns out, she said, the smartest investment I ever made was patience. Lou Marigny still kept a framed photograph of her, the waitress who taught Atlanta's richest man a lesson. And every evening, new diners would point to the photo and ask, "Is that really her?" The maitre d' would simply nod. "Yes, ma'am." And she proved that underestimating the right person can be the most expensive mistake you'll ever make.